Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, a guest speaker joins us to share their photographic journey to help us all connect, inspire, and create. For a list of upcoming presentations, please visit my website at lindanickell.com. Tonight, my guests are Alyce Bender and Brie Stockwell. Alyce is a nature and wildlife photographer, a photography workshop instructor and guide, a regular contributor to the Journal of Wildlife Photography, and an ambassador for Tamron. You can connect with Alyce through her website at abenderphotography.com. Brie Stockwell is a landscape photographer and a certified life coach whose practice focuses on helping creatives reach their personal and professional goals. You can reach Brie through her website at creativemindscoach.com. Recently, Alyce and Brie were named as ambassadors to Nature First Texas region. And in tonight's session, Putting Nature First, an introduction to the 7 principles, Alyce and Brie will talk about the Nature First principles and how they apply to both landscape and wildlife photography, and the positive impacts that these principles can have for both photographers and nature. So welcome to the Happiness Hour, ladies. Are they even here? Hello.
Hello, thank you.
Oh, I was like, where did they go?
Where did Bender go? She's supposed to.
I know. I only see you. Is she even here? Did we lose?
She's back. Okay, good.
Okay. So
she's supposed to lead us off. So,
well, guess what, Brie? It's all on you.
I will run the whole show.
I'm run the whole show. So, all right. First of all, I've met both of you. I know that you guys are really active in the Nature First. I mean, that's one of your. I think that's one of those things that makes your heart tick, is being in nature and then working to help keep it the way it should be. And I don't really know, I think that we kind of touched on it just a little bit, but how did you guys get involved in this organization? Did you raise your hands? Did someone say, hey, because that's usually how it works. So
Brie got me.
Yeah. Okay, so Brie, I'm gonna let Brie go first, because if we let Alyce go first, she's going to run you through the mud, Brie, and blame it on you. So let's let you.
Oh, she already did.
I know. Go for it. All right. Tell us a little bit about.
So I've been doing photography for a couple of years now. And as soon as I found out about Nature First photography and what they stood for, and protecting the environment as, from a photographer's, viewpoint, I went on and took the pledge, and I've been kind of watching and seeing, what people are doing, how people have been advocating for specific areas. And so I personally reached out to them and said, hey, Texas is a really big state. I think it needs representation. I'd love to chat. And so, and because Texas is a large state, and this is a volunteer position, we do what we can. Scott Bacon is who I talked to at Nature First. And he thought it would be a great idea to have more than one ambassador. And so I kind of sort of roped Alyce into joining me.
No, let's not use the word roped, because that sounds like a nasty little thing. You invited her.
I did invite her.
Right?
And I invited some others, and it's not their time yet. And so Bender was so kind to join me. So you can go ahead, and you want to say anything?
I was going to say, it's not like she had to twist my arm very hard. So, as soon as I was asked, I said, yeah, sure. Because much like her, I had taken the pledge, which we'll talk about. But I had taken the pledge a while back when I first learned of them through the Outsiders Conference, which is landscape nature photographers conference that's held in Kanab, run by Ryan Smith, Dave Swindler, and Phil Knotson.
Nope, that's it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
That's it.
I was like, But anyway, so I had learned about it through them and signed up because, yeah, I mean, these are things that I already apply to my photography practice and how I craft my field work. So it only made sense for me to align myself with such an organization. So.
Okay, so I know a little bit about the organization, and this is a great opportunity for those in the room that have never heard of this group. Alyce and Brie are going to walk you through who they are, what they do, and how you can help them accomplish what the organization is about.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. And thank you to Linda for hosting us tonight. Brie and I will be talking about the 7 principles for responsible nature photography as organized by Nature First, a global alliance between nature photographers to put nature first before photography. Both Brie and I are ambassadors for the Texas region for Nature First, as we had already discussed kind of pre-presentation. And this presentation will share with you the 7 principles and our views on how they apply to nature photography. I will be giving examples and a viewpoint as a wildlife photographer, while Brie will be addressing them from the perspective of a landscape photographer. Many of these principles overlap and intertwine with each other, much like nature herself does. As we address each point, I'm sure you'll start seeing the repeating patterns, and we hope that you're able to implement some of these principles into your own photography workflow if you don't already. This is also a great reminder for those who may be familiar with Nature First and the principles, and give you talking points to further the discussion in your own communities. I also want to note that while this movement was started by professional photographers, these principles apply to everyone out there with any sort of camera, be it a Sony Alpha 1 or an iPhone. If you get out in nature and take pictures, these apply. And so I hope that you are able to take something away from this and start to appreciate being able to put nature ahead of photography.
All right, so the first, but not necessarily the best, and these are all of these principles are not, they're not like number 1 is the best one and number 7 is the least. They're all equally important, and we're just presenting them in the way that Nature First presents them to us. So the first principle that we'd like to discuss is prioritize the well-being of nature over photography. So I share this image as part of this prioritizing the well-being of nature over photography, because this comes from actually here in Texas. I know it's super green, right? So this is it's called Colorado Bend State Park. And this is a really popular place to go. It's called Gorman Falls. And I'm sharing this because when I went there for the first time, this is an image from the first time I went. When I went there for the first time, I was chatting with a guy and it's all roped off. And he actually told me, hey, I didn't know anything about Nature First at that time. So I watched him do this and I thought, wait a minute, he's not supposed to go over the ropes. I think there's fragile moss down there. So there's very fragile moss and rocks and formations. And he went and jumped down over in there, walked all over the place, and basically used his phone to capture the photo he wanted to for Instagram. And I know sometimes we're all tempted to do these things, but I'm asking you all to be respectful of nature and put it first over the photography. Now, I share this because I was able to just move a couple of feet down. I took maybe 10 steps and I was able to position myself in a place where I could make this image that I actually really love. It's one of my husband's favorites. And so I'm just saying we can respect nature and do photography and also come away with images that we really love and that we want to make. So please let's have respect so that for nature, so that we can have it be a beautiful place for years to come.
And so with wildlife, there are kind of even more things to consider when it comes to putting the well-being of your subject first. Wildlife subjects are particularly sensitive to disturbance, and the welfare of everyone involved can be put in jeopardy if respect isn't practiced. We hear of instances where owls are baited with mice or foxes are fed from coolers in order to capture, that close-up image where the animal is positioned just so in frame. Is it right to sacrifice the life of those mice just to add an image to a portfolio? Is it right that a fox may be put down because it's become habituated to humans and the food they provide because photographers wanted to spend more time with it in front of the lens? And it's not just predators that end up getting in trouble this way. Recently, a wild stallion on the Outer Banks was trapped and sent to a farm after he'd been habituated to humans with treats, because visitors go with their cell phone, they see the wild horses, they give it some treats, so it comes closer. And so this horse ended up having to, it became aggressive in finding these high calorie treats for its band, for its family. And because of that, it ended up having to live the rest of its life in captivity. Taking a step back from that, from actually feeding wildlife in order to photograph them, consider how any active interaction with a subject can impact their lives. Shorebirds during nesting season are extremely sensitive to perceived threats and can flush from their nests, leaving the chicks and eggs unprotected from the elements or predators. To me, we say that there aren't, these 7 are given kind of equal weight, but in my personal view, this is probably the most important principle to keep in mind because it carries with it the overarching idea that our priority should be what is best for nature and not our portfolio. No photo is worth the life of a subject, and that may sound really dire, but it happens all the time, all over the world, where photographers decide, well, just a bit closer or this crumb won't hurt. But it does, especially when compounded by the number of photographers out there today. Which leads us into the principle of educate yourself about the places you photograph. I'm a firm believer that the better naturalist somebody is, the better nature photographer they will become. Understanding the natural world around you allows you to understand where you're most likely to find certain species, what their behavior means, how to anticipate their movement in order to position yourself for the best perspective of that subject. Knowing more about the animal you're photographing helps you understand what is needed to photograph them without using things like introduced attractants or artificial stimuli to influence their behavior. It allows you to become an observer rather than a participant in the animal's life, leading to a better experience for both the animal and you, the photographer. This type of observational photography often leads to an animal allowing you more time with it without being stressed or hanging around simply because of a high calorie reward. So becoming educated in the areas you photograph doesn't just translate into knowing your target species alone, but the full environment that it inhabits, if you will. What do the plants around the wildlife tell you about, say, the weather? Can you expect your subject to be doing something specific if you see cumulonimbus or cirrus clouds in the sky, or if you have a high or low tide? Something as simple as knowing that if you want to see elk in rut, you need to visit later in the summer or in the fall, depending on the location. Something as simple as knowing that, so that when you show up in June, you're not expecting to see rut, can really get you the images that you are looking for. So educate yourself before you step into the field. And I'm willing to bet, your photography opportunities will increase for it, and your impact on nature will be lessened, which is a win-win.
All right, so I'm coming at this from a landscape photography perspective, and I appreciate that Bender is sharing her perspective on wildlife because I literally know nothing about it. So I'm sharing this image from Joshua Tree. I had the privilege of visiting there a couple of times over this past year, and I found out about it before I went. I wanted to make sure that I did my research, and it's not hard to do. Many of these parks have ways that we can on their website have ways that we can protect the landscape and what's important to watch out for. And so there are so many resources online for finding this information out. So there's really, with the wealth of information that comes to us from the internet, there's no reason why we can't easily educate ourselves. So before I went to Joshua Tree, I found out that Joshua trees are actually, they only grow in these certain places, and they take a long time to grow. They are endangered. And so when I went to this particular location there, I was watching out for any of my footfalls and any small Joshua trees that happen to be in the area, because they take a long time to grow and they are endangered. So anytime you go to a place, you're going to want to understand if there are endangered species, if there is even educating yourself on the weather. I'll say this about, there's a location called the Racetrack in Death Valley, and it's very difficult to get to. You have to go by 4x4 to get there. However, if it's rained recently, then the whole playa, it's a gorgeous place where the rocks, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, where those rocks get moved around, and it used to be kind of mysterious. But if it has rained and the playa is wet and muddy, walking on the playa will permanently, for maybe even centuries, will almost permanently in our lifetimes, you'll have footprints there. And so that's definitely something that you want to be aware of and educate yourself about, so that you don't do that. And one more thing I wanted to educate you all on, because I think it's it's kind of lesser known. So you can maybe talk about it in the chat if you want to, but it's something called a cryptobiotic soil or cryptobiotic crust. And I'm just going to read you some information from, it's called barefoottheory.com. There's so many places you can find out about this, but I'm sharing this with you because it's all over Texas. There are places in Texas, and there are places all around the desert. These are places that you don't think that there's anything living. It literally looks barren, but there are so many microorganisms and growing there. So just wanted to give you a quick education on what this is. So cryptobiotic soil has been dubbed the protector of the desert. Now you'll hear how important it is. The slow-growing cyanobacteria move through wet soil to form a complex web of sticky fibers. This web is what fuses soil particles together, creating a thick, hard layer for new growth. I don't know if you've ever been in the desert and you've seen these crunchy places. Okay, sometimes they have darker spots, and this new growth also helps prevent erosion. This layer has maximum water absorption thanks to its sponge-like makeup, and this function helps to regulate water runoff and reduce evaporation, so it helps hold water in a place where there isn't much. As the time goes on, other organisms begin to grow in the soil, including lichen, moss, fungi, and other bacteria. And this is the part that I think is really important for us. So understanding all of that, when damaged, the colony of organisms could take several hundred to 5,000 plus years to recolonize and reform in arid places. Right. Several hundred to 5,000 years, literally in multiple lifetimes. So basically, it can be irreparably damaged just by the stomp of a foot. So I encourage you, now you know about cryptobiotic soil, and I encourage you to go educate yourself about any place that you go to. All right, the next principle, did we lose Bender? Because I'm not seeing the, I am not seeing the
I don't
slideshow.
see it either. Let me see if she's.
Hi. Okay, I'll just keep going while she brings it up. So the next principle, if that's okay, is reflect on the possible impact of your actions. And this next image that I share is from the kind of the swamps of East Texas. They're really amazing. And I love this quote from Howard Zinn. He said, small acts when multiplied by millions of people can transform the world. Now, maybe we don't have millions of people going to these places, but we do have millions of people visiting national parks and all kinds of places throughout the US and the world. And we're seeing the impacts of more people being out in nature. So this is when we are out, I'm asking you all to reflect on the possible impact of your actions. So I share this because in this location, there are a few things to think about that you might do that might have an impact that I was wanted to be aware of. So such as, I don't want to take a boat, I want to paddle, and I don't want to take a boat with a motor unless I have a guide, because they know exactly where the deep channels are that won't disturb wildlife or any plants. It could be even any of these trees, these cypress trees that are growing that are also are slow growing. And in any of there are places that we also can see the impact of multiple single footfalls. I don't know if any of you have ever been to places where there are bluebonnets, popular bluebonnet locations. We're talking about in Texas, or anywhere where there is, Bender pointed out to me, California, where there are the poppies, any place where there are wildflowers. That we all love these places. We all love to photograph them. They are beautiful. We want to go there for a reason. However, even single footfalls multiplied by many thousands of people can create spaces where these wildflowers don't grow again. And so it's really important to reflect on the impact that we are making one step at a time. And this also includes moving branches, because we don't know what the impact could be. Moving any rocks, including stacking rocks, creating when you remove the rocks from inside of a stream, that could be someone's home that you're disturbing. And I also think it's important to be mindful of where we put, if you're using a tripod, where we put our tripods. Are you putting it in a place that could have a real impact on the environment? So we all have an impact everywhere we go, every time we go out in nature, and it's up to us to figure out what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. With the stacking of rocks, there's so much wildlife habitat that can be destroyed by even just temporarily stacking rocks in rivers. And I know that's a huge pastime here in Texas, but it really does damage those stream and river ecosystems. But, as I brought up earlier, when we deal with wildlife, some small actions on our part can have big impacts to individuals and or their offspring. tying in with knowing your subject, reflecting on possible impact of your actions means that in the instance of, say, the prairie chicken, in order to photograph this particular species without impacting their lives, photographers have to be willing to be in their blind a minimum of 30 minutes before first light, and stay in that small blind until the birds leave their courtship grounds called legs late in the morning. And this can mean being in their blind for 4-6+ hours. Leaving any earlier than that can flush the birds from their breeding grounds and thus impact their breeding success. If this happens too many times, they can move away from that particular lek entirely and try and seek out new areas with less disturbance to hold these courtship rituals. But especially like in this bird situation, their historic range has dwindled to only 7% of their historic range, which doesn't give them a whole lot of places to go. So something as simple as flushing these birds just one morning can have an impact. We also have to be aware that regardless of where we are with our skills as a photographer, if we have what is kind of considered an expensive or pro gear, bystanders do notice how we act. Oftentimes this can mean that those with little knowledge of photography then kind of can venture into situations that impact nature more heavily because they don't have the proper gear. Much like Brie brought up in her, in the first point where she was talking about that incident with the gentleman who had the cell phone stepping off trail going into sensitive moss environments. That's the similar idea that, oh, well, if we get, close to an animal, or we are spending a bit of time with an animal and it's getting closer to us, oh, well, then, that bystander may not have been there the other 2 hours that you were sitting in that one spot waiting for this animal to come up. So they may just see that, oh, you're 25 yards from that animal. Oh, that must be where we can be, and walk straight up. And then that puts undue stress and impacts the wildlife. And then again, so, and I've been guilty of this, if you will, where I've inadvertently caused bear jams because I have a long lens and I'm photographing wildflowers by the side of the road in the Tetons, but people see a long lens and automatically slow down and pull over on the shoulders, even if there isn't places that they're supposed to pull over because they think I'm looking at a bear or something. So understanding what our actions simply by having some of the gear that we can have out in the field, understanding what the optics of that looks like can be part of the impact that you have. Touching on a bit of what Brie was saying about watery environments, locations like Caddo Lake or some of the flooded prairies in Central Florida, aquatic animals often require floating vegetation to either hunt from or to provide cover from predators. If boating or paddling in these areas, even when the vegetation is dormant, props and paddles can injure or kill these plants. Being aware of how you interact with these ecosystems is important, and finding ways to mitigate it is obviously highly encouraged. In this situation at Caddo, it's pretty easy to stay away from the clumps of lily pads or paddle very softly if going near them. In other areas like Central Florida, following natural trails created by creatures like alligators can give you space to maneuver, especially on some of those that are pretty well covered. But I also want to make it clear that we're not trying to discourage exploring for photography. It's just that we want you to be aware of the impact you have when doing it and try and incorporate methods that are lower impact than others. Kind of like those of us, who want to work on our cardio, using an elliptical rather than running on concrete. The elliptical is the lower impact and can help protect your joints. We're trying to do that with nature. So this goes hand in hand with with, you have an impact on the locations when you're there, but then after the fact, use discretion if sharing locations. And for wildlife, I'd like to ask the question of, does your audience really need to know the exact location that you spotted an animal in order to enjoy the image? Or could just giving a broad area have the same impact? Does it change the story unless you're doing a conservation story on on a particular species in a particular location? Does it really change the story if you say, oh, you were at some sensitive location in southern Texas when photographing the endangered, the endangered whooping crane like I have pictured here? Or can you just say, oh, in southern Texas along the coast? Does that change the story? Does that change the impact that your story has when talking about an endangered whooping crane? So, at best, sharing locations does nothing. It just gives viewers information and we all go about our day. But at worst, it can actually open a can of worms that extends to animals losing their lives. We see this every winter with snowy owls as they migrate south, and people take pictures and post locations, and some end up being harassed so much by photographers that they're unable to rest or hunt and thus ultimately die. And unfortunately, in today's social online platforms, it doesn't really matter how many followers you have or how much of an impact you think that your post is going to make. It's still out there for anybody to find later on. And so, more and more wildlife photography groups are asking members not to share exact locations. One group that I'm a part of doesn't even allow snowy owl images until spring to help mitigate even people asking in private messages, where shots were taken. Other locations, such as one spot that I take participants to photograph the endangered whooping cranes, I ask they not share the location because it's on private property. The owners have asked that discretion be used not only to protect the birds, but their own privacy as well. So when, once again, using discretion in sharing your locations can hold multiple purposes. And it does work both ways as well, I think, in, using discretion in sharing and also using discretion in asking for locations. Maybe there's a reason people aren't willing to post more information and more details with their images. So, kind of stop and ask yourself if you feel that it's necessary that you need to know exactly where a shot was taken. But this all doesn't mean not to share locations at all. I frequently will share locations of wildlife that are either easily reached and are used to human traffic, or locations that are in regulated areas and set up to handle human wildlife interactions and encounters, such as state or national parks. Just like fishermen have their secret fishing holes, maybe consider areas with either sensitive species or a lack of infrastructure support that you've found on your own to be your secret photo spots. Then you can determine who to tell, and so that the whole world isn't necessarily showing up on your doorstep. If you don't believe it'll happen, Brie has some examples for you as well.
All right, so I share this image because this is a prime example of a place that I will not share the location to. So do not message me and ask me this, because this is a place that I ask myself these questions, and you can use a couple of these questions to determine if you want to share the location. So I like to ask myself, can the location handle more people than it already has, than already frequented. Okay. And or is the location in a fragile area, meaning is there something that's fragile there? It could be wildlife, it could be formations, it could be this cryptobiotic soil, like, and we know how to, we know where it's at. So in this particular location, it is really very untouched by people. No scratching names on any of the rocks. And I would really like to keep it that way. So I actually did not share it. But there's an image in a few slides from now of Big Bend. And I will tell you all day long that it is from the Lost Mine Trail. You can go there, you can take the same image as me, all day long, because it's an area that's designed to handle more people. So, I wanted to share this. I just wanted to share this quick story. There's a popular YouTuber that, and this speaks to the social media impact, that shared a location on one of his videos about a waterfall. And consequently, many people went there to try and go make the same image that he did. And much of the vegetation was destroyed. In fact, Bender told me that someone died in the process to get there, because it is a kind of a sketchy location. So we have to be careful. Andres, take care. He says he has to step out. And also, and also because of that, the local agencies, the government agencies, had to shut down the whole area and carve out a trail. So take out a lot of the vegetation, and so that they could make a trail with an overlook. So that whole area is now permanently changed. Now it's not, I don't necessarily blame him, but this is the kind of impact that we can have when we do share locations. So it doesn't matter if you have one follower on Instagram or 1 million followers on Instagram, you are still in the public eye when you share images. And so we're just asking that you use discretion when sharing locations, and ask yourself a few questions before you do. All right, so the next one is know and follow rules and regulations. And Bender, I had the privilege of doing a kind of a long road trip with Bender over this past early spring. And we went to this place in New Mexico. It's called Shiprock, and it's on native land. And so knowing and understanding the rules and regulations of any place that you go to is really important. Are you allowed to fly a drone? What are the rules surrounding your own photography? What are you allowed to do or not? In this particular location, this is not only is it's private because it's native land, but it's also sacred land. And we've seen images on social media of people driving their cars down, of posing, of taking images. And this is sacred Native American property. And so all of you can go on their the website. I forget where Bender told me about this. And because she did the research, and I thank her for it. But it says if you make images, please make them from the road. There's a little place to pull off, and you can safely make them from the road, and you're not disturbing anything, and you're not trespassing. And so this is the kind of rules and regulations. This is just an example of some of the rules and regulations that we want to be mindful of before we go to a location. So, rules: stay on trails if designated. And the reason we want to do this is to be respectful, but also to be an example of those people that join us. Sometimes we have non-photographers that join us. Sometimes we have maybe a few photographers that don't know. And it's up to us, if we know, to be informed and then share that with the people that are with us. And I just want to say this one last thing about this. We can be creative and respectful and follow the rules. There is nothing stopping our creativity and our ability to make photographs anywhere we go and still follow all the rules and regulations.
Thank you, Brie. I completely agree with that. I also take a bit of a hard line on this one, because I think because of the information at our fingertips, because we have the internet in the palm of our hand, practically 24/7, ignorance of rules and regulations is not a viable excuse for breaking them. To me, it's just like, when she was talking about Shiprock, where on the Navajo tribal website, it specifically says to photograph from the highway, and it gives you the 2 highways to photograph from for that particular location. And yet, as she said, we see it all the time on social media where people go ahead and drive down that road. In Texas, that sort of thing would get you shot. That's kind of how Texas is if you trespass on land that you're not supposed to be on. So, again, following rules and regulations is really set out there for visitors' safety, but it also has the additional portion of protecting nature and protecting us from nature and nature from us. So following the rules and regulations is very important. And because photographers over the last several years, even pre-COVID, were not necessarily careful enough and caring enough to respect rules and regulations set in place, popular locations such as Moose Wilson Road are often now fully closed to visitors, rather than have park staff have to man the area for all the violations that have occurred in previous seasons when moose and bear are in the area. This image here is of a grizzly that, if you follow any of the bear news out of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, has been the last several years has been in and out of the news. This past spring, so spring of 21, this grizzly sow and her new twin cubs were the subject of an enormous hazing campaign by the state fish and game and U.S. forestry departments. They threw literally everything they had at her, from air-loaded bangers to shotgun launched non-lethal rounds to actively using live dogs to harass her. Her crime being what was called a roadside sow. These are the female grizzlies that have found that the best way to keep their cubs safe from male bears killing them off in the deep woods is to live near the roadsides, closer to human traffic, where the male bears don't like to go. However, this puts these sows in the limelight with photographers. And unlike the famous 399 of Grand Teton, this bear did not have the same protections because she lived in a national forest rather than a national park. So when photographers started breaking laws of the road, sometimes literally parking in the highway, a main trucking route through these mountains where posted speed limits are as high as 65 miles an hour, it was a huge danger to other passing motorists and the photographers themselves. Add that to someone leaving food out to a tractor closer for better images. So instead of dealing with the constant crowds and lawbreakers, officials decided it would be better to remove the animal. Had there not have been a large outcry from people close to the situation, she most likely would have just been killed. As it was, they did extensive hazing with the backup plan of removing her entirely from the ecosystem. Thankfully, this tactic of hazing seemed to work, and the photography community pitched in to police their own up there in this particular situation. So the bear and both her cubs did survive the season, albeit further in the forest where it's more dangerous for the family, but at least they're still alive. Again, all because people didn't follow well-known rules and regulations and opted to put their photography before their safety, the bear's health and safety, and the general public's right to safe driving conditions. So, Other times, rules and regulations may not be as clear cut as don't park in a highway or don't feed the wildlife. Some are more nuanced and do require the photographer to make judgment calls. And I do understand that, especially when working around species of special concern or endangered species. The law states that you can't harass them. Harassment includes stressing the animal or causing the animal to deviate from its natural activities. You have to understand your subject's behavior in order to follow these laws and judge kind of what is harassment for these. And it's on an individual basis as well, whereas one particular individual of a species may allow you to approach to 25 yards, another may start showing signs of distress at 100 yards. So you know, just really be aware of what the rules and regulations are for every piece of property that you are shooting on, in the different states and the different countries. And as much as we all love traveling with our dogs, please, please, please make sure you understand where and when you can travel with your pups. Breaking rules surrounding dogs and leash laws only compounds the optics of irresponsible dog owners and photographers all in one session. So we'll move on. And to always follow leave no trace principles and strive to leave places better than you found them. Many of the leave no trace principles mirror what we've discussed here, such as plan ahead, i.e. educate yourself before going out, and respecting wildlife. But the big thing for me is making sure to dispose of waste in all forms properly. We all know that plastics are ending up in the ocean and other ecosystems, but even microplastics are becoming such a big and widespread issue. You know, these are things like candy wrappers or the tiny little plastic piece that's ripped off the corner of, say, like a packet of peanut butter that you use when you're out hiking. These microplastics have shown to end up in soils and water, impacting wildlife from fish fry to earthworms. And while some animals like this coconut crab have found unique ways to upcycle some of the garbage, trash left behind is still not a positive. I watched as a plastic bag tangled in a brush rattled enough in the wind to startle an entire herd of desert bighorn sheep. This was in May when it was already 90 degrees plus in the desert. And suddenly in the middle of the morning, these sheep are startled to the point of actually having to run and consume, spend energy, raise their body temperatures in a response to what they thought was a threat. And really all it was trash left behind. And, you know, so I'm not saying you have to go out and carry like 10 tires back from the river or anything like that, you know, but just being aware of the small pieces of trash around you and picking up a candy wrapper, a gum wrapper, something like that, putting it in your pocket. And at the end of the day, you're leaving that place better than you found it, as long as you've also packed in and packed out everything that you brought with you. You know, how about the stray water bottle or Coke can you find while watching mergansers on the edge of a pond? It's also something that other people on the trail see, and you'd be surprised how fast it can catch on. For those of you who travel to other countries, it is also seen as a great sign of respect. I'll never forget the heap of thank yous I received from a small group of older Japanese women who happened to see me pick up a few small pieces of trash while hiking there. One who was willing to speak English said that they were very grateful for the care I was showing their country. And I was simply doing what I always do while out, and pocketing small plastic bits I saw on the trail. So.
And speaking of packing out, by the way, I love that you said that the crab was upcycling that top. That's great. gives new meaning to that. And also, speaking of packing out what you bring in, and I went to Big Bend last October, and surprisingly, it was actually still hot. So if any of you go, just know that it could be still hot in October. When you think it's fall and everyone is photographing fall color, you will be roasting at 90-degree heat. So, but I called the rangers there before I went because I wanted to be mindful of what kinds of problems they were experiencing. And they said, our biggest problem is human feces on the trail. So there I said it. We are asking you to pack out your poop with you. So, and this is part of the leave no trace. And there are ways to dispose of your own particular waste. And this maybe is more like when you're backpacking or whatnot. But we just kind of sometimes never know when nature will literally call us. And so part of following these leave no trace principles, one of them is plan ahead and prepare. And you can plan ahead. Sorry, I have hair in my. You can plan ahead and bring some special disposal containers. Like there are some bags. I know White Sands National Park, I think Bender told me, sells them in the shop there. So if you plan ahead and bring that with you. Also, another leave no trace principle is dispose of waste properly. So understanding what you do with that, with any of, great. Check out the comments, you guys. Everyone's having some suggestions. So understanding of how you can dispose of waste. Some places require that you bring it out with you. In some places, it might be okay to dig a deep enough hole and dispose of it that way. Okay, and also you can Google like wag bags is something you might want to Google. And lastly, leave no traces, leave what you find and take only photos. So that please don't take any souvenirs or rocks with you or any of the plant life. Leave it where you found it and only bring back your photos. That's what we're there to enjoy and do our photography at the same time. So that's not a hard ask, right? Okay. Our very last one is actively and promote and educate others about this principle. And here we are, we're doing this. I have pledged to follow these principles. And so I am here actively promoting and educating others about these principles. And I wanted to share a quote from someone who is very active in the community. His name is Phil Monson. So shout out to Phil Monson. I'm going to make sure he gets tagged on this at some point. And he says, the outdoors is for everyone, but everyone needs to be for the outdoors. And so this is my plea to you to educate yourself on all of these principles and actively promote them, including leave no trace, to those around you, wherever you are. And so that we can all share in the beauty of nature and have it for generations to come to be able to enjoy.
And so I love this quote. I love Phil's quote, don't get me wrong. But I also love this quote by Mother Teresa. I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. You know, no one is single-handedly going to change the way every photographer out there approaches their subjects. However, if we try and do better ourselves and talk about the efforts we make with others, specifically the whys and hows, because those seem to always be, you know, well, but why are you doing this? Or how do you do that? We can create a shift in the photography community's culture to one where we put nature first. Education and conversation are keys as more people discover nature and photography now that the barriers to entry for both have been lowered so far. Yet we have many who don't know how to interact with nature, having grown up in a monoculture suburbia or an urban jungle. Others are just finding photography and don't realize that not all lenses are created equal when it comes to what is needed to respectfully photograph wildlife. It is up to us as photographers, as nature enthusiasts, to welcome and help educate both those new to the community and those who may have entered the community before certain actions were considered irresponsible. Many of our parents and grandparents grew up at a time when feeding bears on the roadside in Yellowstone was completely acceptable. We now know that this has been extremely detrimental to human-bear relationships in the park, but not everyone may have gotten the message yet. So we need to continue to talk about how we can put nature first through the use of these 7 principles. And so at this point, you know, I'd like to call on all of you, if you feel that you can adhere and pass on the information about these 7 principles, I really do urge you all to join the Nature First Alliance. It is a global movement at this point with over 7,000 worldwide and continuing to grow. So for those of you who want to see the Nature First in join page in English, this will be your key. But really, it does take each and every one of us to make a difference. Together, we can be this movement to put nature first over photography. Brie, do you have any follow-up words?
I'd like to share a couple of things that are happening in the comments, if that's okay. So Nikki just said, I just went on Nature First Photography and joined. I feel like I'm like, I feel like I'm at some like doing some sort of direct marketing sales or something like this. So, and Egidio says, please add those principles to your website. So he said, I made the pledge last year and added them to my site. So if that's something you've already done, you can add them and share with others. And I also put it in the comments. I also put the website in the comments. If that's something that everyone wants to do, you can go on their website. So they recently bought, it used to be naturefirstphotography.org, and it still is, but they actually recently were able to acquire naturefirst.org, which is really exciting. It's so easy. You can go on there. It's so easy to share with other people. And that's what we're talking about. That's why we're here. We're just trying to help educate you on a few small things that you can start doing so that you can go share with others, and we can spread the movement all around so that we can all have a part in protecting nature. So thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Linda, for offering us this platform to be able to share about Nature First. And it's totally my privilege to be able to be out in nature doing photography. And please, you can email me you can see my website, or you can go on Instagram anytime. I'm going to speak for this for Bender too. If you have any questions, please message us anytime. We're here.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right, ladies, I'm going to get you guys, at least take that presentation down so I can properly thank you for coming. But before we close out, there was a comment early higher up in the comments, and as we're scrolling through it, Jama made a comment that I want you guys to make her feel okay about posting. She's like, you guys are making her feel like she shouldn't post anything, and that's not what you're saying. And so I want to make sure that
it sure sounded like it. It sounded very preachy and stuff. It's like, all right, well, I'm never going to share my Bluebonnet locations, which I do openly share.
Yeah.
But some of those are like from the state capitol, you know, right? Like, so you can walk on, you can what it's all about the
I know that,
education,
but I
right?
I don't say that in every single post I make.
Right.
So
Well,
Right. But
that's exactly
yeah.
it. But there's nothing that says that you can't share the image.
oh, I recognize that. Y'all are making it sound like like you can't. And it's okay for me to do it, but not for other people, is what it came across as. So it's just, that's how it came across.
I'm sorry that that's the way it came across. What I was hoping that it would be is share the image, but does the story require GPS coordinates for an image? Which some people do have embedded in their images, or people will share the exact pond that an animal was located at, and it gets overrun. You know, does that add to the story? Does it have to be that exact, or can we just say Texas Hill Country for bluebonnets?
And I will say that this is part, this all conversation is all part of the principles. And one of them is reflecting on our impact. And I think it's not a problem to share an image. This is my personal opinion. I think it's not a problem to share an image and not make any comment about where it was taken or how we shouldn't step on the bluebonnets. You know, our social media platforms are our own personal platforms, and we get to decide how we use them. And sometimes I want to make a statement about protection, and sometimes I just want to share a pretty photo. And you know, some of them, my bluebonnets are all from my front yard. So sometimes we just want to share a pretty photo and not feel like we have to do that. So we're not asking you to be like nature crusaders every time that you post on social media or put something on your website. We're just asking you to be mindful of any of the impact and not be posting very specific locations if it can't handle it. I mean, my image from Big Bend, happy to tell you it's from the Lost Mine Trail. I'll send you the GPS coordinate if you want to take that exact picture. You can go ahead. It's right on the trail. It's not a problem. Right. And so, you know, so some of them I want to share and some of them I don't. And we all get to decide that. And I'm not necessarily going to judge you for how you follow these principles. This is a personal thing too.
Does that make sense?
Jema, did we lose her?
I don't know that she's still in here. And that's okay. But I wanted to give her an opportunity to, right. I think I've lost her, but I wanted to give her an opportunity to express her opinion. So with that, ladies, I'm going to thank you for providing the information. And I think that, first of all, it starts with the ideas. And for me, I didn't grow up in nature. I'm kind of new to it. And it's something that every time I go out, I learn something new about nature, and I learn a little bit about myself and what I want to get out of it and what I want to share. And for me, I had to laugh, Brie, because I know that you're not a native Texan, but you get it. If you trespass in Texas, you're going to get shot at. And I'm sitting there cringing because I'm like, those are my people shooting at you. So I grew up with respect the fences, respect the no trespassing and the posted signs. So, but overall, your presentation it's just full of ideas and recommendations and things that you guys are taking to heart. And hopefully this will just kind of encourage people to go to the Nature First website and look and see if there's something that you can improve on, or something that is there that you never thought about, or things or some ideas that maybe it'll kind of get your head spinning on how you can be a better, what's the word I'm looking for? A better, there's another word, but a better, I want to say the word and I can't come up with it. I hate it when I do that. But it'll get you.
Steward?
Steward, that's it. Thank you. Thank you. I'm like, it starts with an S. So I better.
Egidio. It's Egidio. He
Egidio,
posted it.
Thank you. Egidio can kind of read my mind sometimes. But it's how we react to nature. And for me, I'm around little kids that are starting to like it. And I'm trying. I mean, they're little bitty beings that are, if I pick up a piece of trash, it's monkey see, monkey do. And before you know it, those things become habit for these little humans. So hopefully that's something that I can be a better person and leave it a little bit better than I found it. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for coming and taking the time to put this program together. And this is something that we can add to my Happiness Hour project. And I so appreciate it. Everyone, you can connect with Alyce through her website, abenderphotography.com. And you can find Brie at creativemindscoach.com. And I'm going to provide all the links to your websites and the Nature First. Is it naturefirstphotography.org?
You can just put
naturefirst.org.
It's both.
Okay, so I'll put that in the show link. So anybody that sees this, next week or next year will be able to click on a link and get to you guys. Next week, Gina Yao will be here to talk about the passion within, from mom photographer to landscape photographer. So until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.